Remember to click that like button and subscribe and enjoy the show. Nobody starts at the finish line. You have to start somewhere. In order for you to get to where you're going, to meet that destination, you can't think that you're going to get there instantly. Podcast where we touch on different things, on different topics, on different areas of life, on how we could go from a nothing place to a something place. And today's topic is time management. That's right, time management. And why are we focusing on time management? Because time management is something that is essential, that actually gravitates around every single area of our life. It gravitates around our productivity. It gravitates around our results. It gravitates around our successes in every category of our life. And time management is not something that is widely expressed in our everyday life. When people think of time management, they usually look at time management as when they got to get a task done, when they have a project at school or at work. But they don't really look at time management in their everyday life, how they allocate their time to the different things that we're doing. So not only are we going to talk about some of the downsides of lack of time management, but we're going to also talk about how we can actually have some tangible steps for having better time management. So let's break down what time management actually means. So let's separate it for a second, right? If we separate it for a second, the defined term for time is plan or arrange something to happen. So if you look at it from the aspect of just time alone, time from the defined term of it is to plan something out. It's to make arrangements. It's to actually schedule things. And so when we look at it from that standpoint, well, everything is actually timed. The birth of a child is timed, right? How much activity we actually do in a certain service, that's time. Look, even when kids are playing video games, what most people don't know is the manufacturer actually puts a certain number of time, an arranged limit on how much playing time someone actually would have on a console. So if a console stops working, well, guess what? It's probably because you didn't ran up your time allotted in that console, which most people don't know about. I remember years ago, you used to get like a red light on like PlayStations or Xboxes and things like that. And that was because that time limit had expanded. And so even going a little older, Dreamcast, that was a video game system, and they would stop working after a certain number of time. And we don't actually know what that time number is because we're just playing the game. But back to what I was talking about. So we tend to wonder why things are overlapping in our life. Well, that's because we haven't scheduled stuff out. So even with our leisure, right? We schedule out our leisure time. Whether it's when you take a vacation, it's scheduled and planned out. But even when you're just home, you watch a TV show, it's scheduled and planned out for usually 30 to 45 minutes, and that's it, and it's over. It's us that batch it together where now things start to overlap, right? So that's what time actually means, is to schedule or plan something out. Right now, let's think about management. Well, management, when people usually hear that, they think of a boss, right? But let's look at the defined term for what management says. It means the process of dealing with or controlling. So if there is a process that it actually takes for you to deal with something in order for you to control it, well, that's you managing it. Parenthood, that's management, because there is a process in order for you to actually control things a certain way, right? Now, and I'm not talking about overly controlling somebody. That's not what I'm talking about. For things to have some type of structure, they need to have management, right? Things that don't have structure usually lack management. So now let's put it together. Time management is actually planning out or scheduling structure. So when we actually plan out and schedule things in our life, we now have structure, which also removes the aspect of some level of stress. Now, some people like to say, well, I don't plan stuff out. I wasn't taught to plan stuff out. Nobody showed me how to plan stuff out. I'm a little too spontaneous to plan things out, and it actually weighs me down. It makes me have a level of stress when I'm like, oh, I got to do this, and I got to get this done, and I got to get this done. That's not what I'm talking about. Well, what I'm talking about is when we schedule and structure things out in our life, when we add some type of limit to it, that's what time management is. Creating a level of limit or boundary so one thing don't cross over into the next thing, so they don't overlap. So we wonder why our life is overlapping the way that it is, while we like, oh man, the house is always dirty. Well, that's because you probably didn't manage or structure out your time properly, so you can do this and then do this and do this. And then something else that a lot of people tend to say is, oh, well, that's going to create a level of stress for me if I got to plan everything out. But think about it. It's more stress that's created from you not doing things. You might have somebody else, say maybe a spouse, or, if you're a parent, you have to come down on the kids, or you have a spouse that's like, well, you said you was going to do this. Or, well, you said that this was going to happen and that didn't happen yet. Well, oh, I was waiting on this to happen and you didn't do that. When are you going to do it? So it actually creates stress for somebody else when we don't actually structure out and set boundaries to the things that we do in our life. So that will actually help us to be able to have less stress. So time management creates less stress when we set those boundaries and those confines. So what's another thing that happens when we don't have proper time management or proper structure in our life? Well, what'll happen is you may be, say, doing things, right? You may say, oh, I'm a person that gets stuff done and I perform these tasks, but I don't really have good time management skills. So what happens is you're actually losing effectiveness. You're losing efficiency, right? You're losing energy. And why do I say that? Well, the reason that I say that is because think about it. If you say you are spontaneous and you just, you clean up the house and you spend time on cleaning up the house. Well, if you didn't actually put any structure into it, any boundaries and any confines, then you'll find yourself cleaning up for 3 hours. Yeah, you got the house clean and you got those things done, but you might have dropped the ball with something else because you didn't put in a proper time frame. So now you lost a level of energy, because if you are efficient in one area of your life, that doesn't actually complement or supplement, should I say, that doesn't supplement for the fact of less effectiveness in another area. So if you are, say, for example, doing really good in one area of your life, but there are other areas in your life that are lacking, well, that one area that's good, it doesn't make up for where you're lacking at. And so with time management, when you don't actually do it, you actually become maybe good at one area, but then you may lack in other areas. And you being good at that one area doesn't replace or make up for the fact that you're lacking in other areas, because individuals give a lot of attention to what they're good at, but they don't give enough attention to where they're lacking. And so when we give that attention to where we're lacking, it helps us to have a better overall rating, so to say, right? It helps us to be well-rounded, people like to say. So what are some other things that we can actually say, we don't do this because, well, that's something that other people could do. I ain't capable of doing that. Well, here's the problem with that thinking. The problem with that thinking is everybody that has a sound mind actually is capable of performing the same things, just differently. And so if one person is capable of doing it with a sound mind, then another person is capable of doing it with a sound mind also. They just do it differently. And so you would actually just have to find ways to do it differently that works for you. Obviously, everything the same way doesn't work for everybody. So it's no different than if I gave you a recipe, or you had somebody gave you a recipe and you say, man, this really tastes really good. Can I get the recipe? Yeah, sure. You get the recipe. It may still taste good, but it doesn't taste like the person that made it. Why? Because everybody does things just a little bit differently, even when you have a step-by-step process. That's what makes us all unique. We all can put our own spin on things. So what's another thing that we want to think about when we're having lack of time management? Well, if that is not something that you are willing to improve or willing to work on, that is not something that you should continue to apologize about, because you're not ready to work on it. And here's the thing, that's okay. It's okay if you're not ready to work on it, but understand that it's not okay for other people to just have to accept that behavior. So you can't think that, oh, well, I'm not ready to work on it. People are going to say, well, cool, you're not ready to work on it. But I don't have to tolerate the lack of at the same time. So we have to understand that that is very, very important for us. So if we are ready to either look for better ways to manage our time, look for some skills, look for some adjustments, see how we can improve, well, here is some actual tangible steps that we can actually take for better time management. So one of the things that we could do for better time management is look over where we are not setting boundaries at in our life. So like actually look, sit down and write down what areas in your life that you are not setting boundaries on. So if you say you're not setting boundaries on how much you watch television, or how much you watch movies, or how much you play the game, well, that's one way to actually start having better time management, by actually writing that down, by actually saying, okay, I'm not setting boundaries in this area of my life or in that area of my life. And because I'm not setting boundaries, it's enabling me from having good time management. So once you actually acknowledge that, then now you can actually start working on it. And so once you have now written down the boundaries where you don't have good time management in your life, so because time management, you could lack it also in how much time you spend with other people. So maybe even on the phone talking to somebody, you don't set boundaries with that. Or maybe you don't set boundaries to how long you're on social media. And it's not saying that you can't be like, oh, well, I want to spend time with this person, or I want to do these activities. I'm not saying that you can't do them or you shouldn't do them. What I'm saying is, where are you not setting a boundary at? So what's a boundary that you could actually set? Well, you could say, well, when I watch TV, I'm going to only watch 2 episodes. Well, 2 episodes is usually an hour. Okay, I'm going to spend an hour of my time, leisure time, of watching this. All right, you didn't set a boundary. Oh, when I'm on social media, I'm going to only spend an hour or whatever on social media for this purpose. So that's the next step. When you set your boundaries, have purpose in your boundaries. So if you say, I'm on social media just to scroll and to laugh and to like pictures and videos, okay, set an hour boundary for that. All right, so after that hour has elapsed, then now you actually would have to get into something else. So maybe, and you may not even be getting off of social media after that hour. You may say, well, now I'm going to spend an hour doing business stuff, doing DMs, actually seeing how I can network and collaborate with other people. I'm going to spend an hour doing that. Well, you're still on social media, but now there is a reason for it. You gave purpose to the boundary. So that's what we have to also do. We have to give purpose to our boundaries that we are setting. So what's another thing? We want to have tangible goals. Like, we really want to make some goals. And so some set goals that we could actually have is actually saying, okay, one of my goals is to be more focused. One of my goals is to be more disciplined. Well, one of my goals is to be more consistent. Well, if those are your goals, now you actually can pencil in how much time that you would dedicate to actually being disciplined in a certain area of your life, or being focused in a certain area of your life, or being consistent in a certain area of your life. You just made categories for the things that your goals that you actually have. You want to try to be more organized. That's another thing that we can actually do. Be more organized. Like, when we actually put things in place in a set frame, then it actually helps us, opposed to us saying, okay, I'm going to work on this, and then I'm going to jump over here, and then I'm going to jump over here, and then I'm going to jump back here, and then you're jumping back and forth. You're not really organized. So again, you're not structured, which means management. Remember, we looked up the defined term. Management is a level of structure. So set limits to non-essential tasks. Yes. What do I mean by setting limits to non-essential tasks? That's the stuff that is not that important, but it's something that you want to do. So I'm not saying eliminate it completely. What I'm saying is set a limit to the non-essential tasks, the stuff that you deem as not really important, but you want to do it still. So you can still do it. Just set a limit to when or how much or how often. That's another thing that you could do. Now, here's another tip. Prioritize least important to most important to now urgent. Because what happens is, when we usually say, oh, well, I'm not going to focus on that because that's least important. Oh, but most people say, well, I got least important and then important. That's not so much important, and this is important. But what I say is least important, most important, and then urgent. So if you actually write down the things in those different categories, okay, these different things are least important. Okay, these different things are important. And then these different things are urgent. Well, what you can actually do is you can actually focus on placing the least important right next to the important, and then right next to the urgent. And so what's an example of that? Well, an example of that could be, say you're trying to communicate with people a little more often. You find yourself not really reaching out to people, like texting them or calling them and things like that. Okay, you may say that that's one of the least important things. Okay, so you got the least important. Okay, one of the things that might be more important is, say, the upkeep of your home, right? Okay, that's a more important thing than the other thing. So you actually now have that down. And then what's something that would be deemed as urgent? Well, something that's deemed as urgent could be, say, cooking. So now that we have those three different things as an example, so what we could do is we'll say, well, the least important thing, which is right next to the most important thing, I'm going to actually say, I'm going to designate, say, 45 minutes to texting and calling somebody or people. Now, obviously, you can text multiple people, so that takes a little time. talking to somebody on the phone will take a little bit more time. So you could actually say, well, I'm gonna text and call people for 45 minutes at 3 o'clock. Okay, so at 3 o'clock, you're only gonna designate 45 minutes to this. So at 3 o'clock, from 3 to 3:45, boom, at 3:45, you now say, I'm going to spend an hour on cleaning up, maybe even 2 hours, I don't know. So say you said an hour on cleaning up, because you could just say, I'm gonna clean up one area. I'm not gonna try to clean up the whole area. I'm gonna spend 1 hour on cleaning up. Okay, so at 3:45 to 4:45, you now are cleaning up. Okay, now what's the urgent task now is right in front of the important task. So now at 4:45, you may say it takes you an hour and a half to prep and cook and things like that. Well, at 4:45, you're going to actually start cooking. So now you actually even got everything done, because you place the least important thing in front of the most important thing, and then the urgent thing right after that. And what happens is we don't feel like we're not doing something, because you can be getting all the urgent and important stuff done, but if you ain't getting done some of the least important stuff, you're going to start to feel like you're not doing the things that you want to do. You're going to start to feel like, oh man, I'm always busy. I don't ever get time to do what I want to do or hang out with people that I want to hang out with. Well, that's because you are not structuring out or having good time management skills. This is going to help you to be able to do that. What's another tip? Another tip is ask somebody that you see has good time management skills. And what's one of the easiest ways, because I know a lot of times it's really difficult for people to ask for help. So ask for some help, ask for some tips, ask somebody what do they think they could do, right? Okay, you could also Google it, time management skills examples. Okay, but asking for help. And here's one of the tricks that you can actually do to feel more comfortable with asking for help. Asking for help is knowing your limitations. So when you ask for help, that's you are just now being aware of yourself, and you are now taking acknowledgement of your failings or shortcomings, and it's also showing that you're trying to improve. So that's a strength. Asking for help is not a weakness, it's a strength. So that's one of the ways to actually overcome the fear of wanting to ask somebody for help, is knowing your limitations. And then the very last tip would be anything that requires a lot of time, say maybe a project that you're doing for work or for your business, or you have to say cook a lot of food for something or things like that, or you got to watch somebody for a long period of time. Okay, one of the things that you should actually do when you have those long tasks is take a 5 to 10 minute break. And the reason that I say only take a 5 to 10 minute break is because that is going to give you an opportunity to digress a little bit. So say you're at work and you're always on the computer, you're this on the computer. Well, after a sufficient amount of time of you working on the computer, you can actually schedule in 5 to 10 minute breaks and say, okay, I want to just take a 5-minute breather, give my eyes a chance to reset, give my brain a chance to reset. Don't think about what it is that you're doing. Just think about, one of the ways to not think about what you're doing so you can reset is focus on your breathing. Close your eyes. Envision your body taking deep breaths. Envision the air coming out of your mouth. So just continue to envision you inhaling, exhaling. Inhaling, exhaling. So by you envisioning yourself actually doing that, that's going to help you to not focus on the things that you have to do or what you don't have to do or what's later. That's going to help you to actually take that reset. So those are some of the tips that we can actually take to have better time management. So just a quick recap. It's setting goals, prioritizing our time, setting limits to our boundaries, right? Prioritizing things from least important to most important to urgent, and then making a time slot for each of those things, right? Asking for help, and then also taking a 5 to 10 minute break when we're doing long tasks. So remember, you are great. Greatness is a mindset, and I want you to go and be great. Now it is time for my moment. So one of my moments that I can remember having is when I was catching the bus and I was going to work. And as I'm catching a bus, going to work, I'm leaving. It's probably taking me a good maybe hour and a half to get to my job, right? And I had to catch not one, but 2 buses and a train. So as I'm catching a bus and I'm getting to my destination, which was work at the time, it's very, very, very early. I had to be to work at a previous job at the airport. I had to be there at like sometimes 4:30, 5 o'clock in the morning. So obviously that meant that I had to get up at like 3 something. It's just like, just the thought of me thinking about that now is like taxing and exhausting, right? But as I'm actually making my way there, I had noticed while I'm on my way to the job, there's a lot of stuff that I just never even paid attention to when I was driving. So as I'm on my hour and a half trek to my job, I'm looking at all of these different facilities, all of these different buildings, and I'm like, wow, I didn't even notice that my city, which is Philly, I didn't even notice that my city had some of the things that it had. And so that was just a crazy moment for me where I just realized that we don't pay attention, or at least I wasn't paying attention to a lot of the gems that was in my city. Because when you driving, you focused on not hitting nobody and your destination. So it's a lot of stuff that you're not seeing. And so it just made me come to the realization that we have to focus, or at least I have to focus, on the stuff that is around me. Like really take time out to enjoy what's around me. So what do I mean? I'm a person that tends to get caught in the daze sometimes, right? So as I was on my way to work this one day, and again, it takes me an hour and a half to get there, I leave out my house and I just see some birds flying. And you're probably thinking, well, there's nothing really spectacular about birds. Well, I'm just looking at these birds and I was just like, kind of like amazed of them. And I probably stood there for like 5 or 10 minutes and I'm like, caught in the daze looking at these birds. And the alarm went off on my watch and I'm like, oh snaps, I gotta hurry up. So it just made me realize that we have to take time out to notice some of the things that are around us that we look at as not that deep. So it was just a moment for me of reflection, of really paying attention to the things that I deem as, oh, well, it's passing by stuff. And it really made me say, I need to take in and value the things that are around me, my surroundings, nature, life, and even things that I consider as passing by things. So that was just a mindful moment with Mr. Mindful Minute.
You're in control of how you feel. You're in control. You are the determining factor of your feelings. No one else can control how you feel. Remember, you're in control how you feel. So control your feelings.